واللعنة الدائمة الباقية لأعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد, brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. We'll inshallah be holding these seminars at least once a month, depending on the scheduling. We're the Thursday night, and so I'll try to keep it within the time frame of the Thursday program. So my talk will be maybe 20 to 25 minutes. It might go to half an hour, I don't know. It depends on how much interest you show in food and drink. To begin with, let me talk about the importance of this issue, because sometimes, we say these are very mundane things. Why should we really even care about it, what we are eating or what we are drinking? And this is where I would like to begin with this ayat of Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nas, kulu mimma fil ardi halalan tayyiba. That all people, and the address is not only to Muslims, but to the people in general. Eat of whatever is in the earth that is halal and tayyib, permissible and good. After making that general statement, it's interesting how immediately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ مُبِينٌ. And do not follow the footsteps of the shaitan, he is indeed your open enemy. This is where we come to realize the importance of this issue. That you have one option of eating what is halal and tayyib. The opposite of that is the other option. And that Allah doesn't say it's haram and khabith. What does He say? Following the footsteps of shaitan. So whenever you move away from what is halal and tayyib, you are actually being trapped by the shaitan. He uses food and drink as a means of influencing us. And what does he do? The ayat goes on, إِنَّمَا يَأْمُرُكُمْ بِالسُّوءِ وَالْفَحْشَاءِ وَأَن تَقُولُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. He does three things through food and drink which are haram and khabith, which are not halal and tayyib. What does he do? Number one, he uses that as a way of urging you to go towards su, towards evil. And number two, towards fahsha, indecent acts. And number three, more serious, would be that, he urges you that you end up saying things against Allah that you don't know. Means you end up in saying, what kind of rule is this? Why should it be haram? I like it. I enjoy it. Means this rebelliousness, this is where it comes in. So three things are there, implication of following the shaitan in the matters of food and drink. One is, going towards su. The other is the issue of fahsha, indecency, and the most important one is that to have this rebellious nature. And we will talk about this last one towards the end, inshallah. But let us go to the practical side of it. Let me start very simply with talking about the general rules. I'm sure all of you know about it, but we want to just set the ground, so everybody is on the same page. Number one, coming to the green area. Vegetable, fruits, and grains. Any problem there? No. It is all halal. And this is where, then we come to this second issue of the animals which are there in the sea. And this is where we come to the non-fish items. And remember, we are talking about a Shi'i point of view, because there's a big difference between the Shi'i fiqh and the Sunni fiqh on this issue of seafood. They allow everything which is from the seafood. In Shia laws, it is very restrictive. Anything which is not considered to be part of the category of fish is haram. And then coming to the issue of fish. In fish, we had two types of fish, scale fish and skin fish. Skin fish, again, is out. When it comes to scale fish, this is where, that is halal. And in that category, you will include shrimp and prawns. So at least you're okay on that. There's no problems. Now, when we talk about non-fish animals, so squid, lobster, clams, and frogs, these are all haram. In Sunni fiqh it is permissible, in Shia fiqh it is not permissible at all. When we talk about the scale fish, we include shrimp and prawns here. Actually, there was somebody who asked this question from the Imam that, how come shrimps and prawns are allowed? And Imam said, you can eat it. Don't you see it moves in a shell, or that shell is like a scale for it. And so we have a specific nas from Ma'soom, including shrimp and prawns in the fish category of the scale fish. And therefore, that is permissible. Now, what kind of, if you want a list of the fish, one of the places I would mention for you to go is a book called A Code of Practice for Muslims in the West. At the end, you have names and pictures of about 28 fish which are halal. Now, that's not the complete list. Probably in different parts of the world, there are different kinds of fish. As long as, if you have any questions, always, check on the internet, see whether it is part of the skin fish or scale fish, it has scales or not. And if you're able to find that, that should be permissible. Inshallah, we'll try, just as, there is a listing of the reliable and safe restaurants in GTA area. We'll also try to come up with a list of the common fish which are permissible to us, just to make it easier for people to refer to it. Now, so moving on from the sea creatures, we go on to the land creatures, and this is where we see the simple list here. All land animals are haram except this. In the domesticated animals, cow, sheep, goat, camel are known. Some of you might be surprised, a horse, donkey, and mule. But there is star besides it, and star means it is makruh. But it's not haram. I'm told in some of the parts of the Muslim world, they serve, donkey biryani. People don't even know what they're eating. But anyway, it is makruh, it is not haram. Coming to the wild animals, buffalo, mountain sheep, wild ass or gazelle or deer, this is all, permissible. So what do you hear about the Robin Hood story, hunting deer in the forest there? As far as making it halal or not, that's permissible. But there are certain things that we have to keep in mind. Number one, in case of the domesticated animals, their meat becomes halal only if they are slaughtered according to the Sharia laws. We are not going to go into details of that. The main thing is that the slaughterer must be a Muslim, and he should say the Basmala, Bismillah at the time of the slaughtering. And it doesn't even matter whether it is done manually or mechanized slaughtering, as long as the conditions are fulfilled, it would be acceptable. In case of the wild animals, their meat is halal only when they are hunted by a Muslim who says Basmala at the moment of shooting, pulling the trigger, or letting the string of the bow go at that time and he says Bismillah, or when he's throwing the spear, or whatever weapons that you use. Actually, you are even allowed in Islam to use hunting dogs for hunting. And when you let that hunting dog go, to say go, to this animal, this is where you have to say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim at that time. But these are all, I don't think it's common, but just to complete the discussion here. Going on to the air creatures, when we are talking about the birds, all the birds would be halal except two categories. The birds which are predatory and the birds that glide more than flap their wings when they are flying. So eagle would be in or out? It would be out. Now, in case of the birds, even the halal birds, when we say they're halal, they only become permissible for us to eat if they are slaughtered. In case of the domesticated, ones like chicken, or hunted in case of the wild ones. The eggs of the halal birds are halal, and the eggs of the haram birds are haram. So that is the criteria. It depends on the bird itself. So these are the general, the criteria of what is halal and haram. But let us now talk about some of the more practical issues. Let's start with the vegetation. Vegetarian food prepared by non-Muslims. First, we come to the category of Ahl al-Kitab. And this is where we would say that it is halal unless we know otherwise. If we want to know that maybe there is contamination, it was mixed with something haram, or there was alcohol involved, then of course your knowledge will override the general rule. So the general rule is that vegetarian food prepared by Ahl Kitab is halal unless you come to know otherwise. You don't have to go and inquire, but if you come to know otherwise, then that would be the view that you have to follow. What about other non-Muslims who are not from Ahl Kitab? For example, the Hindus or the Buddhists. The majority, vast majority of mujtahideen, they say that if you know that there has been physical contact between that non-Muslim who is not Kitabi with the food, which was either the hand was wet or the food was wet, then it will be considered to be najis and haram. But if you don't know that, then it is okay. Then we come to the third category in vegetarian food, which is actually the vegetarian food which is packed. So it's not, open. It is not being served to you in that way. You're just buying it from the store. In this situation, all kinds of packed vegetarian food are permissible, whether it comes from Kitab, Ahl Kitab, or from non-Ahl Kitab. Doesn't matter, as long as it is packed. However, you had to be careful there. Sometimes, it might seem that it is vegetarian or non-meat, but sometimes they might end up using ingredients which has, haram elements. You go to a non-Muslim, restaurant and you order, for example, salad. Maybe the dressing has alcohol in it. Or you go to the grocery store and you buy fruit snack bars. It is better to look at the ingredients, whether it has something haram in it or not. So this is as far as the vegetarian food by non-Muslims is concerned. Coming to the meat products from non-Muslims, the principle is opposite. In a vegetarian, the issue was it is permissible unless you know otherwise. When it comes to the meat products, anything that you buy or receive from a non-Muslim which has meat in it, it is to be considered to be haram. That is the ongoing, that is the principle that you have to follow. Similarly, if you buy or receive food containing meat from a Muslim who bought it from a non-Muslim, whose supplier was a non-Muslim, and it didn't verify whether it was zabiha or not, then even that meat product will be haram. For example, if you buy, let's say, meat even from a Muslim, but the mark says that this is from a non-Muslim company. If it is not verified, it doesn't have just certification, doesn't have the mark of one of the certifying Muslim organizations, then you cannot eat that meat. But if it has the certified logo, let's say from Halal Monitoring Authority, HMA, or Halal Monitoring Organization, or from Canada Halal, or other companies who are in this business of certifying the halal meat, even if it comes from a non-Muslim company, then it should be okay. What about meat products from Muslims? Again, here the principle changes. When you buy from non-Muslims, you assume it is haram. But when you buy it from Muslims, or from a Muslim market, then you will consider it to be halal, and there is no need for any further inquiry. I would emphasize this point that if you are invited to a Muslim's house and you are served meat dish, you are not required to ask that Muslim whether this is zabiha and halal or not. It's not only that you are not required to ask that question, asking that question goes against the akhlaq in Islam. Because you are now doubting that fellow Muslim. There was a person by then, there were actually three companions, Fuzail and Zurara and Muhammad bin Muslim, very prominent companions of the fifth Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam. And they asked the Imam about buying meat from the Muslim market where they don't know what the butchers are doing because they didn't see them slaughtering. What do you do? Do you just assume? And Imam says, Kul, إِذَا كَانَ ذَلِكَ فِي سُوقِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. Then eat that meat if it is from the Muslim market. وَلَا تَسْأَلْ عَنْهُ. And don't ask about it. So, this issue of going to a Muslim's house, you're invited there, and then on the table you say, brother, can you tell me this is zabi or halal or not? This is not righteousness. This is not taqwa. This is not being religious. This is you're actually insulting that person. Either if you have some doubts, don't accept the invitation. But if you're already there, just eat that. And that there's no issue of, embarrassing that individual or asking the questions in that way. So this is basically the basic, minimum standard as far as the Sharia is concerned. Let me now try to just raise the bar a little bit. And I think we are talking with the audience who are followers of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. He is known as Imam al-Muttaqeen. He is the Imam of the righteous people. So there is an expectation from each one of us that we should not just stop ourselves at the minimum level, the basic level, we should go a step above. And this is where I would like to emphasize a few points. Going back to this ayat of Quran, Ya ayyuhan nas kulu mimma fil ardi halalan tayyib. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses two terms, halal and tayyib, permissible and good. You know, tayyib can be understood in different ways. Tayyib could one mean that, you know, be wise in choosing the category of or the quantity of even the halal food that you are eating. You know, then your food is not only halal, it becomes good for your health. Or if it is something which is halal, but you know, because of your health situation is going to be harmful, you know, then you refrain from it. And that would be the meaning of, you know, only eating things which are tayyib also. Another meaning would be that tayyib means you refrain from things which are doubtful. Now, when we talk about this issue of, you know, moving from the basic level to the level of those who exercise extra precaution in the matters of food and drink, you know, this is an expectation from those who are followers of Imam al-Muttaqeen. But remember, not at the expense of insulting a fellow Muslim. There might be a person who has this standard that I'll only eat the meat that I slaughter myself, because that's the only way I will have 100%, you know, surety that this is halal. Well, that can be your standard at home. Not when you come to the Jafri, you know, community center for niyaz. Not when you go as a guest to a Muslim's home. You know, that is for yourself and that level. But when you are interacting, this is where you realize that sometimes you might be saying you think you are doing something good, but you're actually ending up insulting the fellow Muslim. So that keep in mind that we are talking about moving above the basic level, but not at the expense of insulting, you know, fellow Muslims. For example, Amir al-Mu'mineen in al-Balagha, this is saying number 113, he says, لا ورع كالوقوف عند الشبهة. Wara' means this issue of self-control. And he says, there is no better form of self-control like that of restraint in a doubtful situation. So if you have doubt about certain things, on a personal level, it is better for you to refrain. He had a companion who died during his lifetime. And Amir al-Mu'mineen actually in Nahj al-Balagha, in saying number 289, remembers him. Unfortunately, he doesn't name that person. He just says, you know, كَانَ لِي فِي مَا مَضَى أَخٌ فِي اللَّهِ. You know, I had a brother in faith who passed away in the previous, you know, years. And there is a discussion among the commentators of Nahj al-Balagha whether he's referring to Abu Dhar or Usman bin Mad'un. This is a close companion of Amir al-Mu'mineen, very pious and muttaqi people. And he gives actually 7 to 8 qualities of that person, describes it. You know, just think about it. There is a potential that we can reach to a point where Ali says, you are akhi fillah. This fellow was not from a member of the family. He was, you know, not Banu Hashim or something like that. But because of their akhlaq, they were such that Amir al-Mu'mineen takes pride in calling him akhi fillah. He is my brethren for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And out of these 7 to 8 qualities, and at the end he says, you might not be able to follow all these qualities, but he says, I urge you to try and acquire the qualities as much as you can. And this is in saying number 289. 2 of those qualities that he mentions. Number 1, he says, وَكَانَ خَارِجًا مِنْ سُلْطَانِ بَطْنِهِ. He was free from the control of his stomach. He was not slave of his, desire for food and drink. He controlled what he is eating. The food was not controlling him. He was eating in order to live. He was not living for the sake of eating. And then he ends up, and this is not about food and drink only, it's a general statement. He says, وَكَانَ إِذَا بَدَأُهُ أَمْرَانِ. When two options confronted him in any given situation, food and drink or anything else. And when you talk about two options confronting you, you are talking about the gray area. If it was black and white, the issues were clear. But when he says there are two options, he was not sure. Do I go this way or that way? Amir al-Mu'minin describes him by saying, نَظَرَ أَيُّهُمَا أَقْرَبُ إِلَى الْهَوَى. He will see which one of these two options that I have is closer to my desire. فَخَالِفُهُ. Then he will go against it, just to be on the safe side. And so this is where we have to realize that, there is a minimum standard which is there. When you ask the question from any alim or a guide or a teacher or a marja, mujtahid, they will just give you the basic ruling. This comes part of akhlaq and spiritual development. But let us not ignore that and keep that also in perspective. Because what happens is that, when we talk about sins, and eating haram is a sin. When a person commits, for example, a guna, a sin, then he is making himself or herself liable for adhab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Later on, that person regrets. And he sincerely asks for forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does tawbah and istighfar, and reforms himself, amends his attitude and his behavior. By doing that, he has averted the azab, which was one impact of that sin. But the question is, what about what is known as asar-e waz'i? And what does asar-e waz'i mean? Let us take an example of a person who is alcoholic. And he, was drinking for 20 years. Then somehow he saw the light. Sincerely regretted what he had done. So because of drinking for 20 years, he is liable for the punishment in the akhirah. The adhab is there. But now that he regrets sincerely, does tawbah sincerely, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive him. So that asar in the akhirah, the impact in the akhirah will be averted by his tawbah. Allah will accept his tawbah. But what about the impact of 20 years of being alcoholic on his body? Will that go away with the tawbah? That is asar waz'i. Tawbah is done. His azab has been stopped. But the harm that he has, put his body to it for 20 years drinking, and as an alcoholic, for example, the impact on his liver, by doing tawbah and istighfar, that is not going to be corrected. Yes, exceptionally, there can be a mu'jiza or miracle or karama, that's a different thing. But normally, what has happened because of that sin will still be there, although the azab in the akhirah has been erased. So when we talk about food and drink, we have to realize that there are multiple impacts of that. When we eat haram food, number one, we are making ourselves liable for azab in the hereafter, number one. Number two, there will be implication on our body, illness and disease. But number three, the impact of haram food on our soul. Remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that ayah says, Ya ayyuhan nas, kulu mimma fil ardi halalan tayyiba, wa la tattabi'u khutawat ash-shaytan. Do not follow the footsteps of the shaitan. What does he do? He will urge you towards evil. He will urge you towards indecency. And he will urge you to become rebellious against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A person who eats haram, later on he changes, repents sincerely, changes his lifestyle. His azab, the first impact will be erased. He will be forgiven. But what about the impact on his body, on his soul? That is asar waz'i will remain. And when it comes to the issue of the soul, there are certain things. For example, number one, we talk about this issue, I've been praying to Allah for this for a long, long time, and my du'as are not being answered. Well, there can be many, many different reasons for the dua not being answered. Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't consider that to be useful for you or good for you. Or maybe this is not the right timing, so maybe it will be accepted, but later on. There could be many different factors. One of the factors where the du'as are not answered is the issue of haram food. A person had come to the Prophet and he said, أُحِبُّ أَن يُسْتَجَابَ دُعَائِي. I wish my dua is answered. And the Prophet says, طَحِّرْ بَعْكَلَكَ وَلَا تَدْخِلْ بَطْنَكَ عَلَى حَرَامٍ. Purify your food and don't put haram in your stomach. So the Prophet is saying that, because your food is not pure and tahir, and you are putting haram food in your stomach, this is one of the reasons why your du'as are not being answered. So this is asar waz'i, and this is where we have to be careful about it on the spiritual level. Another is sometimes we get this question, that there was a time when I used to have this joy, happiness when I used to do the ibadat. I lost that. Why? One of the reasons would be, there is a long hadith in the hadith of Mi'raj, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks to the Prophet. One of the statements he made was, Ya Ahmad, inna al-ibada ashrat ajza. That ibadat and the act of worship consists of 10 parts. تسعة منها طلب الحرام. 9 of those 10 parts are related to seeking halal. Ibadat is not only namaz and dua and fasting. 9 out of 10 parts of ibadat is seeking halal sustenance. فإذا طيبت مطعمك ومشربك فأنت في حفظي وكنفي. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the Prophet, when your food and drink is pure, then you are in my protection and in my care. And this is where we have to realize that, when we talk about this issue of, halal and haram, one of the things is that it has an impact on us, and one of the impacts is losing this joy of doing the ibadat. I'll end here, and then inshallah, let's see how many questions we have for tonight.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. صل على محمد وآل محمد. Thank you very much, Maulana, for your presentation. So we'll now move on to the Q&A part of our session. And as mentioned earlier, you can submit your questions online on menti.com. And again, the password or the code is 552090. Now, we have received around about 70 questions on Menti, and there's a lot of us here in the audience as well. So it'll be a challenge to get everyone's question answered tonight. However, we'll do our utmost to get those questions as much as possible, as many as possible answered during the time that we have. If I can just ask Fahim to just come forward to the gents and float the mic around on the gents side. And on the ladies side, I believe you have a mic there? Yes, we do have. Okay, wonderful. So on that note, we'll get started with the question on Menti while we get the mic on the gents floated around. So Maulana, the question here is, can you please outline what kinds of vanilla extract are allowed?
Vanilla extract. See, the issue is that the majority opinion of our mujtahideen is that alcohol is haram as well as najis. And so, because the vanilla is actually dipped into alcohol, it becomes a problem from that point of view. However, Ayatollah Sistani holds a minority opinion on that issue. He, as well as, from the early days, we have Sheikh Saduq, who used to believe that alcohol is haram, but it's not najis. And so that's where the issue comes up, that if something is dipped in alcohol or alcohol has been put into it, according to Ayatollah Sistani, because it is not najis, that would not be a problem. But he says if it is in a very minute amount, which is, the example given is 0.05. If it is in that minute amount, then it is permissible. But if it is much more than that, and the problem is that what we have been hearing, and it's not still to find out from the experts, sometimes they say that the level of alcohol which is still there, residue in the vanilla, is still, it's not minute, it is more than that. And so it is a problematic issue.
Thank you very much. Okay, on the gent side, we'll get Ahmed Somji to pass the mic around. So for those of you who have questions, please put your hand up and I'll point to you, inshallah. Ahmed, if you can just go to the brother there. If you just turn the mic on, please.
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
I think you touched on food additives with vanilla specifically. My question is more general about food additives. If you could just give an outline of whether or not it's required to check the permissibility of food additives on processed foods. Most processed foods nowadays contain E100, E571. There are so many now, it's difficult to even keep track. So whether or not it's required to check the permissibility of those specific food additives before you consume them. And just very quickly, I had a second question, and that is about, you touched on vegetarian food being prepared by non-Muslims, and as long as you don't know that they've had contact with wet hands or a part of their body, it's allowed. But isn't it a safe assumption to make that when you're preparing food through the process, like cutting, washing, presenting, that there's high likelihood that there would have been contact? Thank you.
Okay, the first one, as far as ingredients is concerned, I think if we are dealing with a Muslim market or Muslim seller, it's a different principle. You don't really have to worry about ingredients. But if you are getting an item from a non-Muslim or from a non-Muslim market, then it is important to look at the ingredients, because they could have things in there. As we said, it might look like it's vegetarian, but it might have ingredients which are actually from animal base. And so it's important to look at it. Now I know the list is becoming more complicated, even the names are very technical now. So inshallah we'll try to come up with something, a list which can be available for the people. So inshallah we'll work on it. On the second question, where you see the vegetarian dish from a non-Muslim who is not Ahl Kitab, and if you don't know whether it has been touched, then you can assume that it is halal. That is the basic ruling. So I'll ask you to go back to the second part of my talk, What I was talking about, moving a step up from the minimum, rulings. Most of us are South Asians. Our food, it's very rare to know of a food which has been cooked without touching. So although we didn't see it, but if you really ask yourself inside, that although I didn't see it being touched, but back in my mind I know that this food could not have been cooked unless it was touched. Now you can say maybe they used gloves. You can come up with all those, and that was the minimum standard, no problem. But I think you have to deal it on your own level. And I would say, yes, exercise that precaution. But the basic rules will still be there that it is halal unless you see it being touched.
Imran, just on the same topic, you mentioned that packed vegetables, also packed vegetarian meal by a non-Muslim is halal. Is that factory packed? Is that what you meant?
Yeah, basically we are talking about if it's packed, it is factory packed, yes.
Okay. All right.
Means if you look at, for example, even some of the snacks we have in the Indian stores here in GTA, some of them have this company's name which is not Muslim. I don't want to mention names here of any company or anything, so please don't ask me specific companies, okay? But I remember seeing a documentary of one of those companies here where from A to Z everything was automatic. There was no human element actually touching anything. So if it is packed in that way, I think we can assume it is okay.
Okay, thank you. On the sister side, any questions?
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
So, there's a lot of lepes and rennet in different kinds of food. So I just want to know what's the Islamic ruling and conditions on that.
You repeat again? You talk about?
Like cheese, and we're talking about lepes or rennet.
Okay. When we talk about, cheese, basically there are two kinds of enzyme used in it. One is rennet, and the other is pepsin. Pepsin comes from pigs, so that is out for us. Rennet comes from the calf or the cow, which is young. It comes from the stomach of it. It is in the lining of the stomach. And that enzyme, which is known as rennet or rennet, even if it comes from a calf or a cow which was not slaughtered according to Zabiha ruling, it is okay. Because if you look at the items of najasat, there are certain things which are exempted from najasat, and one of them is known as anfaha. Anfaha is rennet. So rennet is okay, but pepsin is, remember pig and pepsin, PP. Stay away from that, but rennet would be okay.
All right, thank you very much, Maulana. We now have over 100 questions on Menti, so this will be most challenging. However, we'll do our utmost to try and get these answered as quickly as possible. Not all of them, but as many, inshallah. Okay, so without further ado, Assalamu alaikum. Are we permitted to eat food from a house, for example, if our neighbors who are Ismaili or Agha Khani?
Food prepared by Ismaili, Khani, or Bohri is food prepared by Sunnis. There is no difference there. We consider them to be Muslims, unless you come to know otherwise. So there is no problem there. They are considered as Muslims.
Ahsant. Okay, just by show of hands, how many of you have questions on the gent side? Just wanted to gauge interest here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, all right. If you can just make your way to the back, there's a hand over there. In the meanwhile, we'll answer this question on menti. Is grape juice haram? If so, why?
Last year, I think this issue had come up about the grape juice. The issue was that there is fermentation in it, and therefore the issue of, sukran and intoxication, and therefore it is haram. But we looked into it, and I asked some of those who are experts in it, and they say the fermentation is not on that level that it becomes intoxicating, so it should be okay.
Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum, Maulana.
Alaikum salam.
There's krill oil. It originates from shrimps just found in North Atlantic area. Does those have the rule of fishing outside water, or even if they are inside and die, it's okay?
Okay, when it comes to so you're talking about the oil extracted from shrimps, you're saying?
For krill. It is
Krill.
shrimp, but called krill.
Type of shrimp, okay. Okay, let me just explain one issue about the fish.
Yeah.
When we talk about fish, the scale fish, which is halal, there are only two things about it. Number one, that it should have scales. Number two, it should have been fished where it was alive when it came into your control. So for example, either you fish it out and it's alive and then it dies later on, it's fine. But if there is a fish which was floating on the water and it was dead, it is haram for us. However, when we talk about commercial fishing, where these huge vessels go and they put in this net of long area, and then it's tons and tons of fish are trapped in it. As long as the fish were trapped in that net when they were alive, that's fine. If they die after coming into the net, it's halal. Or for example, you were fishing and you had about, let's say, 2-3 hooks there with the bet. And one fish comes in and it's trapped. You don't want to take it out, you still want to wait for other 2 bets to be occupied, waiting for other fish to come in. While you're waiting, the first one dies. But because it died after it came into your control or possession, it is halal for you. And so, as far as the issue of, so scaled fish is concerned, if there's no issue of the fisherman or the fisherwoman to be Muslim, there is no issue of Bismillah, there is no issue of slaughtering it, no. The main thing is that it should be, when you caught it, it was alive. Whether it came out of the water or it came in your net and then it died. So any kind of egg or oil made from the fish which is halal is also permissible. Now that special case that you asked, I'll have to just go through my email to check, because I think this question came, and I'm asking my son to later on get all these questions of this part put together. Okay, maybe go to the next question while I look at this.
Okay, thank you. We are now going to be serving tabarruk, and to just assure you all, Al's Pizzeria is halal, so no issues on that front, inshallah.
Okay, I have the answer for Munawar Bhai's question about krill. Yeah, this is a question somebody sent to me in 2014, June. And my answer there is I looked at this oil, krill oil. Although krill looks similar to shrimp, but it is not from the shrimp family, and so its oil would not be okay for us. This is as far as consuming that oil is concerned. What about using it for ointment or rubbing on use?
Okay. If we can,
What?
he's mentioning that krill is the best source of omega-3.
Okay, but since it is not actually from the shrimp family, it would not be permissible to consume it.
Okay.
Ahsan, thank you.
Thank you.
We do have a lot of questions to get through, so if we can just try and keep our questions as brief as possible. Do we have any on the... Okay, we have quite a few on the ladies' side. Thank you very much. Okay, now back to Menti. What is a practical way to find out the religion of the chef in the kitchen if you can't tell by other things in the restaurant and feel shy of asking? Should I repeat that?
So you're talking about the chef, whether the chef is a Muslim or not.
Yes, how does one find out if the chef is Muslim or the religion of...
If
of
you
the
are
chef?
dealing with a non-Muslim restaurant, you will have to inquire that. If you're going to trouble yourself to go all the way there, then at least call up before, on phone. You can maybe ask that more easily, and then go there.
So you're saying we must inquire.
Well, if you're dealing with non-Muslim restaurant, yes.
And if they say that this person has no religion, if they're an atheist?
And you're talking about
No, you pick up the phone.
vegetarian food?
No, I mean you go to a steakhouse and you call up, and it's a non-Muslim. Well, the restaurant is non-Muslim, so to speak, and they admit on the phone that all our chefs or some of our chefs have no religion. They have no faith.
Yeah. Well, then I don't think you should go there.
Ahsan. Okay.
But if it's a Muslim restaurant, then you don't need to ask that question.
Okay.
You'll assume it's okay unless you find otherwise.
All right. On the same topic, if a place serves alcohol and it is said it is okay to eat on a table without alcohol, can you please give your opinion?
So this question basically is assuming that the food is halal. Means it's
Correct.
The meat is zabih and everything.
Correct.
Only that the location serves alcohol.
Correct.
Now, if you're asking me just on a minimum basis, the basic rule about it, if it is a halal dish, you are eating on a table where alcohol is not being served, technically I would say it is permissible. But on a moral, ethical level, spiritual level, I would say, why even bother to go to a place where they are serving alcohol? Because contamination is a problem. How can you be satisfied that things will not mix with one another? Especially when you talk about the Greater Toronto area, mashallah, you people don't realize that you're so lucky. There's so many, halal, okay, restaurants in the city that we don't have to worry about doubtful places.
On the same note, the same question and topic, according to Syed Sistani's rule, he mentions that it is permissible. However, there's a clause there in which he mentions that if it's going to taint your image, so to speak, then it becomes haram. Can you please explain the latter part of that?
Well, there is another issue related to it, that if you frequent a place where there is halal food but also alcohol being served, and there is a danger that your reputation can be tarnished when people see you going at that place, then So it's nothing to do with the food haram and halal. It's more about frequenting a place which can have a negative reputation on you, and that's what you should avoid.
Negative reputation by somebody else looking at you?
Yes, somebody else looking at you and assuming that, na'uzu billah, you are going there, for alcohol.
I see. Ahsan. Okay. Any questions on the gents' side? Ahmed, can you please? In the meanwhile, we'll answer this question. Ahmed there, over there. Can you please put your hand up again? Yes, go ahead. Okay.
If the restaurant is serving halal meat, but the owners are not Muslim, they may be Ahle Kitab, may be Buddhist, because sometimes you can't tell. So do we have to inquire for the chef inside the kitchen? They're not serving alcohol, but they're serving halal meat, but it's not considered a Muslim restaurant. The owner is not Muslim.
The owner being non-Muslim is not an issue. It's more about the chef, the cook. And that is, yes, if you're going to a non-Muslim establishment, you have to inquire that.
Okay. Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum. Your Excellency, my question would be considering the automized slaughtering. You said so long as the conditions are met. Could you kindly elaborate on that? Thank you very much.
When it comes to the automated, slaughtering, mechanized slaughtering, according to Ayatul Sistani, it is permissible if the person who is there at the beginning of starting the process, whether he's pushing the button to start the process, or involved in the initiating the machine. And these machines are very huge. It would probably take this entire hall. And the way they do it, one of the facilities I visited, they used to slaughter 150 chicken in a day. 150,000, not 150. 150,000 chicken in a day. And so as long as the person who is involved in initiating the machine is also the same one who stands there and say, Bismillah, Bismillah. His Bismillah has to be continuous, doesn't have to be matching each bird. Maybe when he says one Bismillah, 3 birds are being, slaughtered. That's okay. So that's the main issue, and then the number of veins which has to be cut is also one of the important requirement. But it should be the live person. Recording of Bismillah, Bismillah doesn't work.
And stunting?
And the starting.
Stunt.
Or the stun. The stunning of the animal, whether it's cow or chicken, or making them go through the chicken in water which has electrical shock in it. If it is to the extent that they are still alive, they don't die because of that, it should be okay.
Okay. Question on menti. Does meat need to be washed to the point that no more blood is seen?
When it comes to the meat, let's say when the cow is slaughtered, after slaughtering of the cow, they let the animal bleed as much as possible. Once the normal amount of blood has come out of the body of the cow, the remaining blood in it is considered to be tahir and pak. So we don't have to be, from the najasat point of view, it doesn't matter whether there is blood in it or not, but of course from more a hygienic point of view, it's better to clean it. But from the najasat point of view, it doesn't matter.
Ahsan. Some questions from the sister side. Can we eat kosher food if halal is not available?
So when we talk about kosher, we mean meat, which is slaughtered according to the Jewish laws or the method. No, if you don't have halal meat, then you have to become vegetarian or learn how to do the slaughtering yourself. Kosher meat is not permissible, no.
Ahsan. Any questions on the gents? Ahmad, if you can please.
2 points about the definition of Muslim. One, you clarified that the Ismaili and the Bohras are considered Muslim. How about Ahmadiyya? And secondly, when we are in remote locations where Muslims are in a minority, we do find sometime an option for a Muslim restaurant, although we can always go vegetarian, as you just explained as a precaution, but from an education standpoint only, we then come across people who are born to a Muslim family with a Muslim name, but everything else we find out later is nothing to do with the Muslim religion. In those situations, that definition still applies, or we have to also be cautious of what a Muslim means when we do have access to that information? And again, just for educational purpose, I understand precaution is better.
Okay. When we talk about Muslim, we are talking about Shia, Sunni, Sunni, Sufi. We're talking about Shia, Ismaili, Isnashari, Bohri. The group that you mentioned, although they say the kalima, but according to the Shias and Sunnis, both theology, they are not theologically considered to be within the fold. And so their zabiha would not be acceptable. Now, if you go to the second question was about a place where they are Muslims, but you don't see any practice. No, for the Muslim market or Muslim slaughter, the adalat or taqwa is not a condition. Otherwise, we will be vegetarian all the time. It's not necessary that the slaughterer be a very religious, pious person, As long as they are Muslims in name, that is sufficient.
Would they be considered as Ahl Kitab?
No, he is talking about Muslims, but we're not practicing.
I'm talking about the first part of the question.
Oh, the first part of question, no. Ahlul Kitab only applies to non-Muslims who were before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Anyone coming after Rasul, any group, believing in a person as a Nabi after Rasulullah is not Ahl Kitab nor a Muslim.
Okay.
Like for example, the Nation of Islam in America, they believe in Elijah Muhammad as a prophet of this century. So they would not be technically considered to be, because one of the cardinal beliefs of the Shias and Sunnis is that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Khatimun Nabiyyin. He is the last of the prophets and the messengers.
Awesome. Thank you, Maulana. Okay, on Menti, we'll answer this question. Is ice cap from Tim Hortons allowed?
If you are muqallid of Ayat al-Sistani, who doesn't believe in the najasat of alcohol, and if it's just a flavor of it or a touch of it or what?
Just mentioned ice cap allowed.
Yeah. Okay, I'll come back to that. Let me check if I have it in my email somewhere.
Didn't think it would be so, okay. All right, how many do we have on the gent side? Any hands on the gents? We got one there, we got another there. On the sister side, just by show of hands, do we have any questions on the lady side? No? So we have one at the front there? I do have the papers. Okay, all right, fine. So we'll go to the paper from the sisters. Maulana, we have some questions about evaporation. Some puff pastry contains alcohol as a preservative. Once it is baked, the alcohol evaporates. So is that puff pastry allowed to eat? And the second stretch of the same question goes, some oil sprays contain alcohol. Once sprayed on a pan and heated, the alcohol evaporates. So is that oil spray allowed? Where is the mic on the gent side? You have it? Can I just see your hands on the gents again? Fahim, on my right, please. You have a question.
On this, both questions about puff pastry containing alcohol as preservative and some oil sprays contain alcohol. Again, according to Syed Sistani, if it is in a very minute amount, remember the figure given in his question answers was 0.05%, then that would be okay. If it's more than that, then no. 0.05.
So that is the minute sort of level for people to judge. Okay, all right. Where's Ahmed? Okay, all right.
So there is a movement of many people going towards veganism or vegetarianism, whereby they're vegetarian and they avoid dairy products as well. So what is Islam's opinion about this movement?
Islam doesn't promote vegan diet in that way as a lifestyle. No, Islam believes in a kind of a balanced diet where meat also should be part of it. Actually, it's a matter of option, but I think if you're asking that whether Islam promotes vegan diet as a lifestyle, no. Actually, if you go without meat for 40 days, it is considered to be makruh. So even those who are going in this vegan diet, every 40th day, they should be eating meat to get out of that karahat.
Ahsan. Okay, a question on menti. Proper animal treatment is part of the rules for zabiha. We know that animals are not treated well in industrialized farms. Can we really consider them halal if only the rules of slaughtering are respected?
Whether the treatment with the animals is humane or not, these are not issues related to the animal becoming halal or haram. That's only the issue of slaughtering. That is the criteria. Now, if you find out that there is a supplier who is using, inhuman ways of treating animals, you stay away from it, but it doesn't have an impact on the hilliyat of that process or that meat.
So you mentioned about the Quranic verse about the food having to be halal and tayyib. So wouldn't this fall under the category of tayyib?
Well, it will still be halal in a way. You are moving into a higher level if you want to do that. But that would not have an impact on the halal, the animal being halal and acceptable for consumption.
What about animals who are being caged, like chicken or hen?
That depends on cage by cage. The size of the cage, you can't just say they are caged, therefore it's wrong. It depends on how are they being kept.
We've seen documentaries,
Well,
again, as the person asking the question mentioned, that it's known nowadays that these animals don't live in good conditions.
Well, it's difficult to just generalize it for all suppliers and all companies. You have to look at it case by case, and again, that would have no impact on hilliyat of the zabih.
Okay.
And I think maybe, it's fine to think about it in that way, but I think there are many, many human beings being treated worse than the animals around the world. If we really want to spend our time and our energy for a cause, that is the cause that we should be giving top priority.
Ahsan. Okay. Maulana, can you please emphasize on the concept of contamination as a concern when it comes to halal and haram?
I think when we talk about the issue of contamination is if there is a facility which has haram and halal, food items, if the people who are working there are not really careful about it, You know, for example, you go for a vegetarian, let's say, sandwich, and the items are all there, and the knife being used is the same which is being used also for haram meat. And that same knife is being used to cut the bun or the bread, then already, you know, it becomes najis. So this is where we have to be careful about the locations and the contamination of what is halal, mixing with the haram.
Ahsant. Okay, question from the ladies' side on the paper here. This is in order to raise you higher, as you mentioned in your presentation. So with that, is it therefore better to buy meat from a Shia butcher as opposed to a non-Shia butcher? If we had a choice.
If you have a choice, why not? Why not support your own Shia business? We have somebody here already. I don't want to point him out, but okay. You know, for example, in Canada, there is not a single slaughterhouse which is owned by Muslims. Even those that do the halal, the owners are not Muslims. There is an effort, you know, to buy one of the facilities. You know, we pray for their success. Yeah.
But there's a question here, Maulana, can you tell us where you shop?
Huh? I didn't hear that.
No, that was my question. All the gents, go ahead.
Yes.
Alaikum Maulana. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
Maulana, some time ago, about 10 years or 12 years ago, you had a wonderful research done on gelatin. After that, there have been many new members in the committee, alhamdulillah. Yeah. And the question that is often asked is about gelatin. So what would be your view on that?
The issue of gelatin, you know, Renette, we talked about it. There is no problem. Pepsin is no. So gelatin is very common in many things, and it was in the 80s, mid-80s, when I was in Vancouver, when this issue came up for the first time, for me at least. We looked into it, and according to my understanding, there was istihala. You know, one of the ways a najis thing becomes pak is when they go through the change known as the format is known as istihala. And that was my understanding. So I actually, in one of the question answers which was published in Vancouver in the 80s, I had mentioned that this is okay. There was kind of a, you know, many questions were asked. And from London, they sent that to Ayatollah Khoui. And he basically, his response was saying that, yes, this is right. There is istihala, so gelatin is okay. However, Ayatollah Sistani, and this is where we see the process of ijtihad continues. Ayatollah Sistani is a student of Ayatollah Khoui. When Ayatollah Sistani looks at the process where the gelatin is made, he believes that the change is not good enough for it to become, you know, on the level of istihala. So his latest opinion is that if you are convinced that istihala has taken place, then it's pak and halal for you. If you're not convinced, then it is najis. But if you get something where it says only gelatin, doesn't say it is from animal based or vegetarian based, then he says you can assume that it is okay. So if it is just gelatin by itself, not specifying whether it comes from animal or from vegetable, then you have this benefit of doubt. You can, you know, use it without any problem. But if it's known to be from animal, then according to Sistani, it is not permissible unless you have done your research and you're convinced that the istihala has taken place.
Ahsan. Okay, there's a question on fish regarding raw fish. Is raw fish allowed? Raw, R-A-W. Sorry, Canadian would say raw. Raw fish. Yeah, sushi, for example.
Or raw fish. Or
Yeah, raw. I don't know how to pronounce raw in North American accent.
sushi is a problem.
Sushi is a problem.
Sushi is a term now used for Shia Sunni. Those are mixed. Neither here nor there. And raw fish. Now, when it comes to fish, if there is no harm in using it, it is okay. So eating sushi from halal fish would be okay, but don't become a sushi ever.
Okay. All right, let's move on to a much more simpler question, maybe. Regarding airline food. Yes, there we go. What is the ruling for airline food where halal food is available on request and you cannot verify? For example, Air Canada, they offer halal food. Is that permissible? Similarly, on airlines from non-Muslim or from Muslim countries like Emirates.
If you're traveling in a Muslim airline and they say this is halal food, you can accept it. There's no issue there, unless you come to know otherwise. Remember, your knowledge is always prevailing over all the rules. When it comes to non-Muslim airlines, there is need to ask, because when they say Muslim meal, it does not always mean what we understand. Air Canada Muslim meal, for example, means it doesn't have pork. But it doesn't mean it is zabiya. So when it comes to non-Muslim airlines, it is better to ask. Actually, it is necessary to ask.
We can ask Gala Travels these questions. All right, question. Okay, well, I think we'll take one from the sister side on the paper here. What is classified as non-Muslim restaurants? Chinese restaurants, Japanese restaurants, are they considered to be non-Muslim?
When we say non-Muslim, it means the owner is non-Muslim. You can have a Chinese restaurant which is run by Muslims. So it's not about being Chinese or Japanese. It's about the religion of the owner.
Religion of the owner, or the owner could be non-Muslim, but the chefs are Muslim?
Yeah, I mean, those who work and, the owner, that's where we'll say it's non-Muslim. But if it's owned by a Muslim who is Chinese, it's a Muslim restaurant.
Okay. Are animals which are fed with non-halal feed like animal fats and blood meal, bone meal, will meat from these animals be halal?
If any animal is fed dead meat, then that animal becomes haram for us until it goes through the process. In Mutahirat, you read about it. They have to go through number of days, depending on which kind and which size of animal it is, that they have to be fed what is halal for them, and before they become halal for you.
Ahsan, just by show of hands, how many questions do we have on the gents' side? No? On the ladies' side, any question? We have one. Okay, can we just take that question, and then we'll wrap it up with one more from Menti, and then we'll close the program, inshallah. Sorry, can we just get a mic? Is there somebody available with the mic?
Okay.
Can I just
Let me repeat
that for the online audience? Yeah. So the question is, if you go to a non-Muslim country, if you go to a Muslim country, but the restaurant is a franchisee with a non-Muslim name, then is it permissible to eat from that restaurant? Or would we consider them to be Muslim?
So basically, you're talking about, let's say, McDonald's in Dubai or in Mecca,
Or
outside
TGIF?
Masjid al-Haram. Okay. Um, just because they are haram in Canada doesn't mean it's haram over there. But you have to find out in places where it might be doubtful. There are some Muslim countries where the requirement would be that they provide halal meat. I'm told in Pakistan, for example, that's considered to be an honor to invite you to the McDonald's. But so you're assuming that there the meat would be halal. Or for example, in my visit 2 years ago to South Africa, because of the good number of Muslims there, about 3 million Muslims, mostly from Indian background, who are very good, very powerful in business sector of that country. Because of their influence, all these fast food chains, McDonald's, Burger King, Kentucky, all these different names, wherever you go in South Africa, it's all halal. So it's not that because it's haram there, it would be haram over there also. You'll have to find out. If it's a Muslim country, you might be able to assume, unless you have some doubts. Fish eggs, you said? I don't know, I'll have to check the name, but if it's from a halal fish, the egg of that fish would be okay.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll now end the program with one last question. I have been given the cutoff at 10:05. So the last question for this evening is, are some halal food automatically haram just because of the company that is making it? For instance, Starbucks or Coca-Cola or other Israeli supporters?
Well, as far as it's not just the issue of food and drink, any other item which comes from, so the issue is not of whether it's halal or haram. The issue is supporting the cause of occupation by doing business with a company which openly, supports the cause of Zionism. That is the fatwa. Now, these companies mentioned there, Coca-Cola and things like that, it's not an issue of having a branch over there. Almost all companies in the West have a branch in Israel. And they do business with Israel. The issue is, are they actively donating for the process of occupation there or not? So you have to be smart in identifying one from the other. Otherwise, even this, internet system that we use, even the Intel and everything that we use in our computers to ask all these questions, we can't do that then. So it's not an issue of, using things which have been produced by companies which have business in Israel. It is the issue whether they have a open policy of supporting the cause of occupation.
Ahsant. Okay, did we have...
Like Coca-Cola, for example, I hear quite a lot about it. I'll mention the example. Coca-Cola has a factory in Mashhad. It's brand name. It's not, Coca Iran or something. No. It's Coca-Cola, same, proper brand. So sometimes our people get really overexcited on these issues.
Okay, Ahsant. Did we have one final question on the ladies? Yes? Okay, sorry. So we'll just have one last question. There's a request, and then we'll end. Okay, I really can't read this properly. I don't know if you could. I think,
Okay, are we allowed to use
I think balsamic
balsamic
vinegar,
vinegar?
which has wine in it.
This has been asked before, but I don't remember all this. Let me just check here. The other question is, some fish has alcohol.
Oh, in the batter.
Oh, okay, when it's
Yeah, it's mixed.
the battered fish.
Yes.
No, we will not be able to consume that, no.
Okay, well, while Maulana does try to find the answer of this last question, I'd like to thank everyone's participation here, both the ladies and the gents, and those that did take part online and have been watching us around the globe. We have, as mentioned, we received around 200 Menti questions, so we did have a lot of activity online.
Okay,
so thank you very much.
as far as the balsamic vinegar is concerned, I have the answer here. Vinegar is produced from fermented alcohol, and because of the fermentation, it becomes pak and tahir and permissible for us to use. However, balsamic vinegar is not made from alcohol. It is made from aged pressed grapes, and therefore would not qualify as permissible vinegar. So it is not. It is not allowed.
Okay. I think there's one last question which is relevant to all of us, with your permission, Muki. And this is in regards to forwarding messages on WhatsApp. So there's a question here that if we find out that there's something is maybe haram, for instance, is it our duty to forward that on or no? So for example, the question here is in regards to gelatin in Skittles. If somebody has found out that gelatin in Skittles is not permissible, then is it that person's duty to pass on the information, or is it just for them to keep to themselves?
It is not a duty to go and announce it. If somebody asks them, they can always guide them, or when the discussion comes up. But it's not a duty to just send out, specific, items or brands or locations and things like that on this issue. No, it's not a duty, no.
Ahsan, so no more forward messages from tomorrow onwards. All right, so thank you very much. That concludes our session. And inshallah, we'd like to thank Maulana Syed Muhammad Rizvi for his take on our questions. Can I please ask you all to recite one large salawat for Maulana Syed Muhammad Rizvi? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Please stand for ziyarat.
يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء السلام عليك الحسن المجتبى السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا علي بن حسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته